Welcome, Alex. How are you doing?
Doing very well. I was very much looking forward to our conversation today. Thank you for having me on your show.
How's Bali?
Bali is wonderful. I mean, the thing is, yeah, it's I'm noticing myself fumbling around by giving you an answer in the sense that I've been living here for the last 4.5 years, and with that, it has become a certain normality for me.
Hmm.
If I were to be here for the first time and on a trip, I could probably tell you all these sensational things about Bali. But at the moment, it's like, yes, this is the place that I live at. But what I can communicate to you here right now is just the gratitude that I feel for this island,
Hmm.
for the community that I have here, um, for the ways that I'd felt so supported to come in closer contact with myself, my
Hmm.
authenticity, and as well create clear and vision in terms of who I am. And right now we're as well stepping into rainy season. So with that, I'm noticing myself being a lot more indoors, noticing myself as well quieting down a little bit of my pace, which feels as well quite nice at this time of the year. So yeah, that's a bit of a response to that question.
Beautiful. Do you still see the beauty of the island, or is it just when you live there, you're just like in your work mode and like the outside world is kind of disappearing?
I do. I mean, I think both can coexist. Sometimes I can like fully be in my neuroses and then I just forget how beautiful this island truly is. And sometimes I just need to step out of my environment a little bit. Often it doesn't require much. Sometimes it just requires a drive to the beach. Sometimes when I really notice myself getting caught up in like to-dos and not really appreciating or enjoying the island as much anymore, then I really need to drive out. And then I need to drive out to the local places of Bali. And this is really where I believe I come into closer contact with the sanctity of this island and the beauty of this island, and really come into I'm going to say truer felt expression and experience of how appreciative I am of this island and how amazing this island truly is. So yeah, sometimes it really requires that of me.
Mm, mm. Oh, I totally, yeah, totally resonates with me when I'm in my work mode and I just need to go out to the lake and just ground myself and realize that I'm there and I'm enjoy the nature and yeah, what the moment in the nature gives me back in ways of energy and presence. Yeah. Okay. Hey, Alex, thanks a lot. Let's start with some questions I prepared. So the first one would be, when I think about the man I was in my early 20s, I feel
Compassion.
mhm, the hardest part about not having a strong father figure was
Feeling so confused and not having a direction in life.
the moment I realized I couldn't keep living the way I was when
The moment when I realized if I don't change something, I could genuinely entertain the idea of not wanting to continue my life anymore.
one thing I'm still ashamed to admit about my journey is
Good question.
I know it's not so easy to answer these quickly.
Sometimes I can still be a little bit scattered and I can a little bit be all over the place. And even though I pride myself on being very emotionally grounded and contained, there's many moments in my life as well where I'm still not that. And I think especially as someone who supports other men, there's some shame around that because there's an identity around, oh no, I have to have it all together.
Beautiful. I love to talk about that later on. If I'm honest, the place where I still struggle the most as a man is
Trusting particularly the feminine and trusting women, especially in relationship to opening my heart and trusting as well that my heart will be protected and treated with care. I think that's definitely still an edge that I'm working on.
mm, what I wish men knew about themselves is
Hmm. How beautiful they truly are.
beautiful. Yeah, I know these questions are not that easy to answer. Sometimes you need a bit of reflection on these. But I think, yeah, I would like to jump in what you were just saying about the feminine. Let's go straight into that.
Make it happen.
Opening opening your heart. Like, could you explain what you mean by that? Especially in the context of you being a coach for other men, maybe creating workshops where you make them open up to their hearts. There's this phrase saying the longest distance for a man is 18 centimeters from his head to his heart, or something like
Mm.
that. I know. I don't know if you have heard that. What do you think?
Absolutely. I mean, it might be useful or not for me to give just a little bit of my history around my relationship to the feminine, particularly as it expresses with women. Um, Especially in my young 20s, I'm going to say, and my earlier years, there was a constant chase for the approval of women because it was one of the things that I prided myself on in wanting to gain their approval. Because gaining their approval to me meant that I was valuable. To me meant I was chosen. To me meant I was worthy. And so with that, there was a time in my life, there was a phase in my life where I was incessantly chasing their worth. And I would also argue I had a bit of a misconstrued vision of how women are. And I noticed how I would place a lot of women on a pedestal, which eventually I ended up realizing was something as well that was very, I'm going to say, I didn't realize the negative impacts that as well had on the women that I was dating and in relationship with, in the recognition that I was dehumanizing them. I was really not being able to relate to them as they are, but more from my perceptions of them. And so it just created a lot of distortions around my eyes and views of women, which, eventually ended up hitting me and biting me in the ass, let's say, a few years prior, which had led to, I'm going to say, an unraveling of a lot of the pain that happened in my earlier years that was simply not dealt with. And I realized how so much of that does show up in relationship, does show up in the in connection to love and intimacy and authentic relating to each other. I noticed this is where some of my biggest edges would come up. And also I would notice how where as well my biggest fears would arise because some of my experiences had taught me early on that if I was truly myself, if I was to truly bear myself as I am in this moment and share what is happening for me, love will be removed from me.
Hmm.
Love will be taken away from me. And so that's my imprint.
Hmm.
And so with that, I notice I'm still navigating that. And, I guess what's different today compared to those years where those things had unconsciously directed and guided me is that I'm aware of them
Hmm.
and I as well have ways to work with them that doesn't take me away from my humanness around it and that I still have those triggers. I still have fears. I still have ways that I want to close up and protect myself. And on better days, I choose not to. I choose to do the thing that I perceive to be right.
Hmm.
And then those moments when I can't make that choice, my intention or my attempt is to come back into alignment, come back into truth and honesty as quick as possible when I fall out of it. So those are some reflections that are coming up for me in terms of the question that you'd posed.
Hmm. Beautiful reflections. I mean, man's work for myself is a long path, and finding out about your childhood, your teenage years as a boy, becoming a man, what it means to be a man, finding out how your dad treated you and what he taught you, and bringing all that up and looking at it from different perspectives and realizing what it does to yourself is, I think, an important path. and also a liberating path, but also a pretty heavy path, from all the perspectives and all the realizations you have on that path. How was it for you, or still is? Because I think we can agree on that. When you start the work, it'll never end. Um, in what way would you say, looking back, reflecting on your childhood and being the son of your father is tough?
That's a good question. I think the biggest wound with my dad was perceiving his absence, particularly emotionally, and how I didn't really feel chosen by him. I think this is also something that very much is connected to my connection and relationship with women, that there always seemed to be this way that he would choose work over me. And, of course, at that time, I couldn't really discern the fact that, he was doing the best that he could at the time to really um, adhere to the provider role. So I would say that was a big thing. But I would also say that, especially when I entered my teenage years, something that was very difficult for me at the time was the ways that he wanted me to fall into his footsteps. He'd
Mhm,
as well communicated the fact that in many ways he wanted me to be his protege in his line of profession. He was a carpenter,
mhm,
and he's always been very gifted with his hands. Something as well that I would say as well I have as a skill, but in terms of my inner nature and who I am, let's just say I was quite different from the way he wanted me to be. And I noticed that I was continuously at odds with him around that, which created a lot of internal conflict around this is how my dad needs me to be. This is what um, will reward a sense of love and validation from him. And if I were to stay true to myself here, it might lead to a level of disconnection. The moments that were, I'm going to say, the most challenging for me is the moments when things would become heated and between the two of us, and as well, there would be conflict. And I noticed that my inner nature is more geared towards being honest, being true, being real, but also standing up for myself in the
mhm,
moments when something doesn't feel true and doesn't feel aligned. And coming as well from a Russian German background, where there is certain understandings of, you know, that children are to obey their parents and they have nothing to say, right? They should rather listen than speak. I noticed that that didn't really land well with my father when I actually just wanted to be relational with him. And it was those moments when I would speak up. Usually he would withdraw. And the most painful moments where we would, he would just not talk for a few days. He would just completely ignore me, and I
mhm,
noticed how I would be in this uttermost void in relationship to him, where it was just like, huh, like I could apologize right now, and with that betray myself, but then as well come back into connection with him, or I could, stick true to myself, but then be in disconnection with him. So it was kind of like a lose lose dynamic. So I would say those are kind of like some of the main things that kind of came up, and just the absence of guidance. I mean, my own father lost his dad when he was 17. It's
mhm,
like he didn't have male role models. He didn't have guidance. He didn't have anyone that shared with him how to be a man
mhm,
or
mhm,
what a man is, how to
mhm,
be a father to someone.
mhm,
He didn't have any of that.
mhm,
And so
mhm,
with that, he couldn't really give me a strong imprint of that. And I really was at loss, and
mhm.
really needed to find my own answers. And that really as well has brought me to my path.
How I could imagine that you are, as I know you now, as I got to know you, that you are following the best as you can, the path to open your heart, to be connected to your heart, to be connected to your truth, to your essence, listen to your intuition, and so on. In what way? I mean, your dad feels that. he sees that maybe. In what way has that changed? Your own process has changed the relationship to your father.
Well, first of all, I want to acknowledge that, the man that I call my father today is a very different man compared to who he was then. And I would say as well, things changed massively roughly a decade ago when he had a heart attack. And I would say in many ways that humbled him and led to a certain level of humility and modesty and gentleness that I would argue was always there, but he couldn't really show or demonstrate or depict, especially when he was predominantly leading in the provider and protector role as a father, as a patriarch of the family, let's just say. He and all I can just say is he was very stressed. So I want to say, I want to acknowledge that he's changed massively, and so that has definitely led to a certain level of impact around that. But I think as well, I really had to go on my own journey of coming into acceptance of my father, and coming into acknowledgement as well around the ways that I was still attempting to keep him in the pit. To there was a time, especially in my 20s, where I was I believed I was superior to him. And I, in many ways, started adopting the same role that he adopted with me when I was a teenager. Right. And so I looked down upon him. I was avoidant. I didn't want to really be in connection to him. And it was a way for me to actually, I'm going to say, pay back the ways that he had hurt me as a child. And, there's been a number of experiences that had essentially showed me the pain of that, the pain of needing to be right, the pain of needing to justify, oh, I deserve to be angry at you, Dad. I deserve to be in disconnection here with you right now because you were a shitty father.
Mm,
Like had I needed to humble myself and realize how that was as well hurting me. And I recall there was one distinct experience. How long ago was this? A bit over 2 years ago, with a mentor that I worked with in the US. And, it was a 4-day retreat where I would say a lot of my father's stuff was coming up at the time. And eventually he brought us to nature, and he guided us into an experience where we are supposed to find resolve or resolution with anything that we were working with. And I think it was the first time where I really allowed myself to actually feel the grief and the pain, not just of not having the relationship with my father that I really wanted and needed, because that was definitely a part of it, but also the ways that I had blocked out love from him
mm,
towards me for over a decade, I'm going to say, but also for the ways that I have withheld myself loving him over a decade. So I guess what I'm trying to say is that there's so many opportunities where I believe this man's already changed.
yeah,
He's not the guy that he used to be, that I was so pissed off about. But I wasn't willing to accept that. I
mm,
wasn't willing to accept the fact that he's changed. He just wants to love me. He just wants to be in connection with me. I needed to hold on to my anger and my
mm,
justification around why he was so shitty. And
mm,
so those experiences had really led me to soften a lot of my anger towards him. Last thing I'll say to this as well is I had a very definitive experience a few months ago, which I'm going to say closed a loop around many things around my relationship to my dad, which is I ended up having an interview with my father. This was inspired by Nick Warner initially, who I'm sure you as well might know. And he inspired me to ask my father the questions that I'd never asked him, the questions that I'd want to know the answers of before, let's just say, he dies.
mhm,
I wanted to have the conversations that we haven't had yet in our lives. And I wanted to understand him. I
mm,
wanted to understand, why has he become the man that he was? What led him to behave and perhaps even treat me in the ways that he had treated me? What were some of his fears, dreams, desires, aspirations? What are some of his regrets? What were some of his hopes in life that never came into fruition?
Mm, yeah,
What were the moments he felt most connected to me? What are the aspects in me that he sees that resemble him? So those are questions that I asked, and that led to like a 4-hour conversation with my father. I ended up recording the whole thing. Of course, I'm not going to publish it. This is really for my own private purposes, but it was a very, very meaningful experience. It was incredibly bonding. I think at that time, I just came to acceptance, man. I just
mhm,
came into acceptance around the fact my dad is who he is. He did the best that he could, and I can move on. So
yeah,
I can
yeah.
go on, but I'll leave it here.
No, I think it's beautiful. Like I didn't plan to talk about your father that long, but I think it's so beautiful and it's so important because um, not only from my own experience, but my last podcast was with one of my very good friends. I know him all my life, and we're talking about our fathers. They knew each other, same
Mm,
generation.
yep,
They grew up after the Second World War in Germany, and so we're talking about our fathers. And I believe that our own story is so deeply connected to our fathers. And when you start doing man's work and finding out who you are as a man, it is so important to look at your dad, to find out who he was and who guided him, what his life experience was, and why he chose to be the man, subconsciously or consciously, who he was as a father, as a man, as a husband, and so on. So I think it's really beautiful to take space, to take time to think about the questions you always wanted to ask your father, to find out who you are yourself. So I think that's a really good practice, especially recording it. How, um, I mean, you just said it, it changed something. You found peace with your dad, probably more depth as well in your relationship with your father.
totally. Absolutely. I think a big thing that, again, was a realization I already had prior, but I think what it really came into a level of embodiment is that I had taken my father off the role of needing to continue parenting me.
How
I
did you do that?
realized, pardon?
How
Oh,
did you do that?
well, to me, it's more of a psychological understanding around the recognition where, and this is something that my one of my mentors had as well supported me in. He had referenced a few years ago the ways that I was still unconsciously demanding both my parents to still parent me, right? And it was coming across in my bitterness, in my anger, in my sharpness towards my parents. Yeah, because you didn't parent me the way I believe you should have parented me. And this is why I'm pissed off at you, right? And so what I'm attempting to say is I was still in many ways dictated by my own role as a victim, where I felt so justified in. However, the thing that I'd really come into recognition of is it is not their role anymore to parent me. That's not their job anymore. It is my job to parent myself. And I think that's the role that I really needed to embrace and own. And the more I did that, the more I could then appreciate the very things that my parents could provide me. Not so much in reference to parenting me, but more in reference to the love and the connection that is available.
Hmm.
Because until that time, I couldn't even open myself up to that, because I was still under this subtle demand and expectation of who I believe they should be
Yeah.
versus embracing who they really are and what as well they're capable of.
Hmm. Beautiful. Wow, that's a huge breakthrough. How would you, um, how would you coach other men who would like to step into that process? Because I mean, it's not a process you start over the weekend in a workshop where you realize how to reparent yourself. And starting to accept what your parents did all your life and the love they gave you, and how they uh, gave space and safety to you as a child. Um, how did you step into that reparenting yourself, and what does it
Yeah.
mean in simple words?
Right. Well, I mean, this could be like an entire podcast here itself.
Exactly.
But I guess the place I would like to bring any listener in to begin is to draw awareness to the very triggers that might still be informing and dictating them, especially as it relates to their parents. And allowing those triggers to as well point them to the deeper unresolved stuff that might still be there. Um, and noticing as well the ways that you might have as well disconnected yourself from what's true to you, who you authentically are, as it relates to your parents. I'll give you an example around that. What I observe with a lot of men is that we either attempt to resemble our fathers because we're looking for his approval. You know, for us, he's kind of like the North Star that we're following, and we're wanting to be like him because there is a level of admiration and reverence to that. Beautiful. But at the same time, it can as well take us away from truly owning our own sense of worth to ourselves. I would say what's probably more true for most individuals is they don't want to be like their fathers. And so as a result, they swing completely the opposite way. For me, it was being or becoming a nice guy. Well, what did that mean for me? It led to me disconnecting to any subtle hint of the qualities in my father that I despised, that I didn't want have anything to do with. This could be his aggression. This could be his anger. This could be his firmness, his direction, his structure. This could be even the ways that he would express his mm, desire, perhaps even. And there's all these ways that I then believed, oh, I don't want to be like you. And if I was like you, that would make me less valuable. And there was a way that I felt justified in being somebody completely different from my father. And because I'm completely different from my father, I'm better than my father. So I guess what I'm as well trying to point towards here is, where has someone listening here come into a deeper disconnection from the aspects of themselves that are innate? What are the strategies that you needed to learn in order to keep yourself safe in relationship to your parents? Maybe you needed to learn to caretake your mother or emotionally manage her experience all the time. And as a result, abandoning and betraying yourself.
Mm,
Maybe you had to learn to stay silent and keep quiet in those moments when intensity arises. Maybe you needed to be a yes man because saying no would be threatening. And also, how did you look for approval? What got you attention? What got you respect? What got you admiration? What gave you a sense of significance with them? I think all of those as frames could be really valuable just to unveil and to reveal the ways we might have disconnected from our true and innate nature. And then, of course, really asking yourself as well the question, honestly and earnestly, what are the moments that have hurt me? What are the moments where I didn't feel seen, where I didn't feel heard, where I didn't feel met, where I didn't feel attuned to, where I didn't feel recognized, where I didn't feel appreciated, where I didn't feel safe, where I didn't feel love? I think all of those are important explorations for us as individuals. And what I also want to name here is, I believe a lot of individuals are scared of stepping into that or even going into that journey. Of
mm,
course, I want to perhaps preface here, if this is something that you don't feel comfortable doing on your own, do it in a therapeutic setting, do it in coaching context with a facilitator who can guide and support you through such a thing.
mhm,
But what I want to communicate is, I think a lot of individuals are afraid of stepping into that journey because they fear that they will then distort the way they view their parents, right? All of a sudden they're going to feel like victims. They don't want to be victims. So I don't want to be someone that blames my parents and points the fingers at them. I don't want to create more ruptures and disconnections. That's why I shoved it all like underneath the rug, right?
Mm.
I would argue the reason why it's still important to look at that is because, whether you address it or not, the unaddressed, unacknowledged hurt or pain will still be there. And you might actually learn how to navigate that without tending to it. But I believe it will take away from depth. It will take away from the level of connection that you can truly experience in relationship to your parents. So I would argue there is value to looking at the moments that have hurt us and being in designated spaces where we actually get to feel the hurt, where we actually get to feel the pain, where we actually get to move through the anger. And this is also where I'm going to say, some of my somatic work comes in, especially in the coaching context. We got to allow ourselves to create corrective experiences to those moments where we couldn't come into completion of something. Maybe there's something we wanted to say, but we choked up in a moment because it didn't feel safe. Maybe you want to express a boundary, but it didn't feel right to do that, or it felt threatening to do that. Maybe we wanted to communicate how something hurt us and actually allow ourselves to cry. And it didn't feel safe to because
Mm.
we would receive judgment.
Mm.
We got to create space for these experiences that still in some ways dictate us from the past to
Mm.
actually have space and room so we get to actually feel them, because the more we actually get to feel them, the more we come into completions within our nervous system in the recognition, oh, this experience that happened is now in the past. This is not something that is still occurring, because if it's not completed, the nervous system still registers as if we're still in the experience. This is the challenge when we don't actually address our emotional challenges.
Mm.
And then from there, moving forwards, I think there also needs to come a time once we've done the essential work to move through those experiences. And this also really requires our strong, honest discernment. Have I done the work? Have I moved through the pain? Have I felt that? I think once we've done that, it comes to a point, at least for me in my journey, where I've needed to stop blaming my parents. I've needed to actually stop um, pointing at them for the reason why I'm still the way I am. And the moments when those aspects of me would still come up, I needed to learn to parent myself. So what that means to me is the moments there is an emotional trigger that would arise, you can consider that this is usually not our current day self that is responding to the situation, but usually revert back to like a 6-year-old self or an 8-year-old self or a 14-year-old self. And we're usually bringing in the response that we had learned at that time. So parenting to me is noticing the trigger as it arises, allowing some space and room, first of all, for it to breathe, meaning to highlight what the sensation might be there, what conversation is occurring around this trigger. It could be something like, these people don't respect me, they don't value me, all of that, right? And then asking ourselves, what is the underlying hurt around that? And then providing ourselves the very thing we would need, or we might have needed at that time when that trigger first occurred in its origin. You know, this could be providing us a level of acknowledgement that we didn't receive from others, or a level of safety that we didn't receive from others, a
Mm.
level of compassion that no one offered us. So these are all the ways that I believe parenting ourselves can come through. So I think I could say more, but that I would say is the gist of what I wanted to say to that.
Yeah, beautiful. A lot of wisdom. A lot of I can feel that you learned. You did a lot of work in the last, I'd say, what, 10 years or something. That's what you
Decade.
said before, a decade. And yeah, the work, as you said, is influencing all of our relationships. And uh, you're not a father, are you?
No, I'm not.
Not
I
yet.
would love
Yeah.
to be one, but not yet.
Yeah. Because I can tell you, becoming a father yourself, I wouldn't say everything starts over, but that's also another huge step where completely different things come up, and where you
I've heard.
see that there are moments, and I've been working on myself for the past 10, 15 years, that all of a sudden the voices of my father, of my mother, come through me, um, talking to my little ones, and I'm like, okay, what's that? Where's that coming from? I thought that's gone. Like, wow, okay. And yeah, I'd say your children are your biggest enlighteners, your biggest gurus, because they are facing you in the most stressful, in the most difficult situations of your life, of your daily life. And yeah, it's beautiful. I'm always saying that I think after being to workshops and retreats and having beautiful experiences, coming back to my daily life in my relationship with my partner and my two kids, that's the real deal. That's the work. That's the toughest retreat I do on a daily basis, because your capacity is not as big. You're stressed. You're under pressure, and then you want to integrate all what you have learned. Damn, it's so hard. Um, I would like to talk about your podcast.
Please.
When did you start? Why did you start? And in what way was your personal process also a trigger to starting this podcast? Because I think even though there are lots of voices out there saying, okay, another podcast, I think it is so important, the work you're doing, bringing all your own wisdom, but also the wisdom of your guests into this world, inspiring other men, other couples, other women, from all what you have learned and from all what your guests have learned. Yeah, maybe you can share a bit. What was the trigger? Why did you start? And how is it?
Hmm. Well, first of all, thank you for these acknowledgments and these kind words, and would absolutely love to reflect the same back to you. And I would say this conversation is a demonstration of what you're building at the moment and what you are
Mm,
going to be building. So I just want to say that you're absolutely doing the same thing. But yeah, man, I mean, the conversation originated almost 2.5 years ago. By now, it's crazy how time flies. But for me, the initiation towards this had truly come at the origins of a relationship that fell apart. I'm going to say 3.5 years ago, but I would say also a lot of the work that I did prior. And I mentioned to you as well that in many ways, one of my biggest wounds had been the way my father was absent, but also the way that I had never received true guidance in terms of what it means to be a man, and also how to lead myself as a man. And also, what I might add to that is I carried a lot of shame towards being in a male body and embodying masculine traits. And so, in many ways, I was very fragmented from myself. And I actually looked down upon most men because from experiences of bullying and the way that I'd seen men um, operating in the world, first of all, I could feel with my sensitive nature it wasn't the way that I wanted to lead, and I just didn't perceive that I could really be at eye level with them in terms of the way I am, and so I just shunned all of that. I just pushed that all away, and I didn't want to be like them. 4.5 years ago, I went through a breathwork practitioner training, and that was probably some of the most moving moments that had led me to be inspired by this podcast, because I would lead breathwork circles and men would come in and I would see them moving through the experiences that they went through. I would hear them at the end of these experiences. And I began to open my heart to men naturally, because what I realized is beyond the veil, beyond the masks, beyond the personas that might be there, they're just like me. And they have the same fears, they have the same hopes, they have the same regrets, they have the same challenges, they have the same desires. They just don't know a path forward, similar to myself. And I would say it was through my wounding experiences and then through the compassion that I felt for the experience of others that led to a certain level of initiation for me to want to support other men. It was around that time I was already operating as a coach in the world, yet I had decided I'm going to solely work with men. I still work with couples and women occasionally, but predominantly, I'm going to say my coaching practice is geared towards men. And so that really had led to a massive shift within my entire business. And I would say that relationship breakup as well that I had pointed out had led to me as well going on an initiation around the discovery of what it means to be a man, how to lead relationships, how to navigate intimacy and sexuality in relationship in a way that's connecting and not disconnecting. And let's just say I've always been a very eager and hungry student, and I've learned from a lot of teachers. And there's a lot of teachers I still wanted to learn from. And I would say I've always been a storyteller. I
Mhm.
I think where even though my biggest wound is around expression and my voice, at the core, a part of me always knew that I was here to teach. I was here to share. I was here to um, inspire others.
Mhm.
And at the time, you know, I think the last kind of inclination that I needed was my friend here in Bali starting a podcast, and I was just like, "Fuck, I just need something," And the last straw for me was I was in a relationship at the time, and then for my 30th birthday, which was 3 years ago almost, she just gifted me 20 hours to a podcast studio, and I was just like, I have no excuses anymore. It was to me, it still is the biggest and most important gift that I ever received because I took those 20 hours and I just ran with it. And I was
Mhm.
just like, I'm going to really talk to the individuals I want to speak with. I'm going to I'm going to have the conversations I want to have. I'm going to lean into the fears that are around this. And honestly, man, it's been to me the biggest initiation.
Mhm.
So I can go on, but I want to just pause here for a moment in case there's any clarifying questions or any
Yeah, yeah.
places you want to go with that.
Yeah, especially, I mean, first of all, I feel you 100% going out there, speaking, going on a stage in some way and showing up with all the insecurities, with all the fear, what might be coming back. So I know exactly what you're talking about, but it's a beautiful process of liberating yourself and showing up and yeah, facing your fears as good as you can. That's a beautiful process. So how many guests have you had so far in your podcast?
Oof.
Around.
Well, I published 62 episodes. So, but I have recorded by now, I'm going to say around over 80. That's my
Okay.
guess.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah, yeah. Um, so I mean, you have a few famous names, I would say, in the scene. They are around. They have been writing books and so on and so on. In what way would you describe a modern masculinity in today's world when you reflect on yourself and what you have learned personally, but also from your guests, what they have shared?
Yeah.
If you put all the pieces and all the pieces from your guests together,
Sure.
and we could go on in that for a few hours.
Are you, so maybe just a clarifying question on that. Is it more in reference to what it means to be a man in our modern times?
Yeah.
Got it.
Yes.
So it's interesting because I've pondered on this question quite a bit. And to be honest with you, I don't ask it a lot on my podcast, maybe in the initial conversations. Because something that dawned on me is that I believe as long as we're still looking for a prescription for what it means to be a man, it actually leads to a certain level of separation and disconnection or distance from our truer nature. So I think it actually doesn't serve us when someone is attempting to prescribe a certain ideology or a certain understanding of this is what a man does, this is who a man is. I am not dismissing and denying the fact that I believe there is innate values, there's innate virtues, there's innate characteristics that one can connect to, I'm going to say, male bodies. And if you want, I can recount those, and I see, of course, parallels and I see similarities to men who are very much embodied in their masculine essence. We can speak about these qualities, but I think there is also something to acknowledge and say about the fact that each man has to deeply inquire in himself. What does it mean to be a man to me? What have I been given in terms of my nature? Everyone has a different temperament. I would say I can be quite blunt and quite firm in certain moments, but generally I have a more gentle temperament. I have met individuals. There's one individual that I consider Omrupani, who's a teacher in the field of BDSM. This guy has a fierce temperament. I mean, part of me just sometimes I just jolt when I hear him speak because it is not my nature to speak in the way
Mhm.
that he does.
Mhm.
But I can see how it's very innate and true to him in terms of his temperament and who he is. And as I see it, I think our path as men is about discovering that. It's about discovering what our nature is, but also highlighting what is it that we want to nurture, highlighting the things that inspire and move us about other men, the things that we experience pain around in our lives, and as well our experiences with masculinity and what we want to be a stand for. What are the virtues that we want to um, cultivate? What are the principles that we want to stand by in the moments when things get difficult? Each of us has to ask ourselves the question. I think a more important question than the one of what does it mean to be a man to me is more around the question of where have I fragmented myself from my true nature? Where have I disconnected from certain aspects of myself? And how can I step into wholeness? I think for me, the path of us as men is for us to step into a certain level of wholeness. And I believe some of the biggest challenges that we experience as men comes as a result of our fragmentation, whether it's being a nice guy that is disconnected from his assertiveness, even his more bold, directive qualities. One could even argue his aggression or his desire. Just consider that I believe all of these qualities, if handled in right relationship, can be noble, are required in certain moments. The individual that we might reference as disconnected, some perhaps might even say quote unquote toxic, he might have disconnected himself from his vulnerability, his softness,
Mhm.
his gentleness, his receptivity, his emotional connection to himself and others.
Mhm.
And his journey is going to as well be about reclaiming those aspects that he had disconnected from and denied. So to me, it's less about what does it mean to be a man? Because if we're still referencing that question based on other people's ways of thinking, we're still trying to prove ourselves. We're still trying to perform masculinity versus embodying masculinity
Mhm.
based on our true nature. So I could go on, but I'll keep it here.
Yeah, yeah, no, no, I totally agree on that because on my path, reading books, going to John Wineland's EMLT training, um, experiencing different situations with myself, but also with other men. I hosted a men's circle for 3 years and experienced the different men in their processes. I agree with you in the way that I would say it is so masculinity is so individual, and I love certain concepts, but I also don't love parts of
Mm-hmm.
certain concepts. And it reminds me of Ayurveda. When me and my partner we studied Ayurveda for a few weeks in India, in an ashram, and our teacher was sharing that the one of the worst things you can do as a human being is comparing yourself to others, because, and then she mentioned the example of animals not comparing each other. The monkey is not comparing itself to the horse and to the turtle, and they're all good as they are. And it made click. And in the context of masculinity and being a man, a father, a partner, I myself have always moments where I have to pull back, connect to myself, and feel into, does that really resonate with me? Or do I think this is the way how to do it? This is how to be a father. This is how to be a great dad. Um, what triggers me a bit, and I haven't looked behind that, is that on social media, I don't really like man going out there saying a real man is, if you are like this, you're still a boy, shaming and pushing other men down. I don't really like that, because uh, I think when men who are in some areas open, and they want to start doing the work, and they hear this picture of, if you're like this and that, if you have these qualities, you're a boy, you know, it doesn't really motivates me to start the process of finding out who I am as a human being. How would you, how's your perspective on that?
I mean, I just 100% agree with you. And, I think this is also some of the shadow aspects of, social media. And I see as well that, um, whether it's done deliberately or consciously or unconsciously, I cannot tell you. But I think in many ways, we're geared towards what leads to the next sensation, what leads us to go viral. And we just got to acknowledge the fact that, first of all, you know, triggering emotional experiences in people usually is something that gets views, right? So eliciting fear, anger, shame in people is something that is going to get more views. And it's kind of the unfortunate thing. I think another reason why people prescribe to such things is because so many people are actually looking someone else to tell them, like, tell me what I need to do in order to be a man. Tell me what a true man is. And just notice as well how disempowering that idea is, in the recognition that I'm looking to someone else to tell me how I should be, right? And disempowering myself in my own innate wisdom around that, and handing someone else my power of myself. So I think this is something that we just truly got to be aware of. And another thing as well, I might just add to the whole thing is, depending on what your values are, depending on your background, depending as well on your experiences, you're going to value different things. And so with that, I think that also leads to so much confusion in so many men that, oh, but this guy said a true man is this thing, but now this man says this. And I think a lot of men are trying to figure it out, and they're trying to figure it out in their heads
Mm,
versus actually coming into the embodied sense of who am I truly?
mhm, mhm.
What
What could
matters to me? What's important to me?
What do you tell men who are at that point of their life where uh, what I see a lot of times is their partners, their wives, kind of, pushing them into a direction of, hey, do something,
Hmm.
work on yourself, find a coach, go into therapy, go to a workshop, whatever, and who are open, who say, okay, yeah, I can feel there is something. I need to do something. I want to do something. But then they see all these voices out there saying a man is like this, like that, like that. What would you tell them, how to guide them themselves through the jungle of what a true man, a good man is in today's world.
I do my best to refrain from offering subscriptions to people, particularly as well because my work is quite tailored and quite bespoke. I recognize that it's hard to point towards a one size fits all approach towards how to help a man through such a thing. But I guess what I can highlight in terms of some pointers that might be useful is to cut some of the noise, is to eliminate the distractions, the things that might lead to even more thought patterns, and bringing them back with curiosity towards what their current experience is, especially around these subject matters. What are their fears? What are their subtle demands and expectations of themselves, of who they should be? Where are the ways that they're pushing themselves away? Where are the ways that they're still rejecting themselves? Where are the ways that they're afraid of being themselves in connection? You know, whether it's in connection to other men or their partners, where are they disconnected from their true nature? To me, it's really about that. The more you come into contact with who you really are, and like I'm almost going to say hunt down the ways that you have divorced yourself from your true nature, I would argue your understanding of masculinity will probably come through that. Let's cut the probably. It will come through that, but not as an intellectual notion, but more as something that you inhabit and embody. But I think it also requires men to be in the uncomfortable void around that, to eliminate the distractions, to eliminate the noise, to come into closer contact around what's going on in my body? What am I actually feeling? What are the aspects of myself that I don't want to be with?
Hmm.
And learning to come into contact with that and become intimate with that. It's about building our relationship to ourselves again. And the more we do that, I think the answers can come. I can get more specific on this, but if I could offer a general process, this would be the one that I would point men towards.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. I mean, we both know that it is a process, and the basis of that is to be open to step into the work, to find help, to take time um, for yourself to find out about all these aspects, about your shadows, about your emotions, about your deep pain, and what's all there. I would say, and you probably can agree that the result of that path is more depth, more knowing who you are, and yeah, being being more true to yourself and to all the people around you, knowing better what you need and who you want, and what spaces and relationships you want to live in.
Yeah, I mean, I absolutely agree. And I think the thing is, especially when we're referencing some of the deeper work that's involved, this might appear quite daunting for a lot of men to step into, especially if they have no experience with such things. But I also want to acknowledge there's great benefits to doing this work. There's great benefits. And I think it's like, if I hear a man stepping or wanting to step into this work because his partner is forcing him to, I would say don't do it. Don't do it. It has to come from your own personal initiative. It has to be something that you want, not for her, but for yourself. You can still want it as well for her because you love her, but it has to also be for you. And I think this is also something that's really important as well for women to receive. You can't force your man into this. He has to be ready for that journey. He has to be willing to go on that journey. And, he has to also be in contact with the things that he truly wants. Right. And these are also the benefits that I've received from this work that I imagine you've received from this work, but it's inner peace. Like I feel so much more peaceful in myself. I feel a lot more confidence. I have a capacity to do things that previously would have terrified me.
Hmm.
I lead relationships with connection.
Mhm.
Yeah, with a certain level of depth and satisfaction. I'm able to be bold in the world and bring a vision to life that, feels deeply connected to who I am at my core, that moves me and that connects me as well to my heart. I could go on, but these are just some of the benefits of this work. And as daunting as some of these things can be, I would argue the benefits that one can receive are absolutely priceless and valuable and absolutely worth it.
Mhm, mhm. Yeah, I totally agree with that. I mean, it can be messy and relationships, friendships, it can break apart because in the process you realize that that's not the way you want to live with certain human beings around you, and especially when it comes to your family, your parents, looking to your past, to your childhood, that can bring up a lot of difficult feelings, a lot of tough decisions you might be taking afterwards or in the process. But I'd say in the end, it's the people around you also feel that you are more authentic, and that guides to more trust in the relationship you're in. Um, what would you say in the end, looking forward to your work, to your coaching, to your podcast? What is there to come for yourself personally on the one hand, and then work-wise on the other hand?
Yeah, I mean, I think one of the biggest things that feels right in front of me is that I'm going to be leaving Bali in just a little bit over 6 months, and I'm going to be moving back to Europe. And I kind of see it as a closing of a loop of the hero's journey that I've been on. And in many ways, the last step of the hero's journey is the return home to provide the gifts and the skills and the teachings that we had received in helping and supporting others on that. So I'll be moving to Berlin for 6 months, and I'm going to say my work has refined over the years numerous times. But one of the things that I'd as well come into acknowledgement, and I think as well my coaching practice has as well very closely guided me towards that, is supporting particularly men in the realms of high performers, business professionals, and entrepreneurs. Those are many of the men that had come to me, and those are as well a lot of men that I'm very inspired to support. While my men's work facilitation is still, I'm going to say, stretches still to the broad public of men and supporting them. I'm going to say my coaching work is very much geared towards high performers and founders and entrepreneurs in this way. And yeah, I guess the thing is, like, over this decade, I've been so inclined to humble myself and learn from other teachers and hone my skills and refine the practice and continue growing. And I really feel that I'm now on a different chapter of my life, and the recognition that I believe at this phase, I've gotten everything that I need right now, at least. And
Mhm,
I do not want to bring in further teachings from others.
mhm,
I simply want to integrate and embody the teachings that I've received until now
mhm,
and bring them together in my own unique and creative way. And so this is what I'm seeing.
mhm,
And for me, my greatest passion is really about supporting individuals and creating transformational experiences. And so, for me, it's really through the embodied coaching that I provide, through the somatic work with the breath and body work, and then the embodied group facilitation. So these are the
mhm,
things I'm seeing in terms of podcasts. I'm going to continue, bringing these conversations out there. I'm really excited about a podcast series I'm going to be publishing towards the end of the year, which is
mhm,
going to be geared towards founders. And it's a 6-part podcast series geared towards challenges and as well some of the solutions that me and my friend Bjorn Koine are providing as well, founders, in terms of different subject matters. So these are some of the things that are coming up for me.
Amazing. beautiful that Berlin is being your home for half a year. For all the people out there in Berlin, look up for Alex. He's doing great work, and I guess you're going to be hosting a few retreats or workshops for men in that time when you're there.
100%.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah,
amazing.
absolutely.
Well, Alex, thank you so much for all your knowledge, your wisdom, for all what you've shared personally and work-wise. Yeah, everyone out there, follow Alex podcast. It's really beautiful. It's a great inspiration for everyone out there, every human being, not only men. You can learn a lot, be inspired and motivated to step into the work if you're hearing the sign that yeah, you're seeing the sign that it's time to change something in your life. Amazing. Alex, thanks for your time, and hope to see you in Berlin someday.
Thank you so much for having me, and looking forward to seeing you as well in person.
Okay, bye bye.